Even though the apartment was right above the smoky intersections of Ipe Pavlova, the room was completely silent. Climbing up the stairs, I could hear the screech of the 22 tram loud enough to wince, but the moment I entered the apartment, the universe went quiet. Greetings, Mark. I have been expecting you. Not for a moment did I consider whether I mentioned my name on the phone. The mood was far too mystic for one to think about technology. Dobrý den, I said, trying to make sense of her eyeshadow. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. She blinked with slow purpose. Bright emerald eyelids watched me from 2 circles of white that extended well past her eyebrows. It didn't feel like we were alone in the room. So, do I just tell you about my problem? There's this horse. No need, she said. The cards will reveal all. And then, she led me to the table. A single candle flickered next to the deck of cards. The rest of the apartment was in complete darkness. Somehow, even though I was in the heart of a crowded city, I felt like I was sitting on the bottom of the ocean. The thing is, I said, after she began shuffling the cards, I think I'm cursed. Is there any way that you could help me with that? There's this horse that keeps on appearing. Take a deep breath, she said, spreading out the stack of cards on the table. Take a deep breath and pick 3 cards. Even though we were in a part of Prague that smells exclusively of smog and fried food, the air of the dark room felt like a forest meadow after a thunderstorm. I picked 3 cards from the collapsed stack, unsure of how they would help me resolve my problem with the horse. Is your heart satisfied with the cards you have picked? She asked. I think so. Calling my heart satisfied would have been an overstatement. My present predicament with the horse had definitely progressed my blood pressure by a decade, but my pulse had no qualm with the 3 cards. She blinked, slower than before, as if she was letting her emerald eyes get a proper look at me. Good, she said. Now turn over the first card and let it speak. Oh no! The words left my mouth without permission. From the table, a grim reaper of charred bones stared back at me. He was angled towards the rising sun. He sat on a familiar horse. The words at the bottom of the card read, Death. Don't worry, dear Mark, she said, smiling. The card of death doesn't mean that you will die. It simply means that there is a big change coming in your life. A change that might seem daunting and destructive, but it is a change that is not yours to resist. The card of death is a card of endings, but within every ending, there is an unavoidable rebirth. The glare of the refrigerator at 3 in the morning, the constantly rising infection charts, the sentimental scrolls through ancient TripAdvisor reviews. Sunday. That's when it would all end. The thought of tour guiding again made my stomach uneasy, but it made me calmer about the death card. Should I, turn over the second card? I asked. What does your heart tell you? She said, smiling. My heart spoke in a language I could not understand, but it didn't seem to have any disagreements with what was on the table. I flipped the second card. Her smile quickly faded away. A second death card. The Grim Reaper was no longer looking back at me. He was riding the familiar horse into the sunrise. In the dim candlelight, the bright card almost hurt my eyes. Is, something wrong? I asked, watching her tranquil face grow nervous by the second. Her blinks quickened, as if she was fighting for control with whatever was hidden behind her eyelids. There's only one death card in the deck, she finally said. The candle matched the quiver in her voice. So, how come there are 2 on the table? Silence. Complete silence. Flip over the 3rd card, my heart suggested. Should I, flip over the final card? No. Her voice was colder than a sudden snowstorm. The candle on the table flickered as if it was caught in an angry draft. No, you should. Flip over the 3rd card, my heart demanded. Without thinking, I reached my hand out. Darkness. The room was plunged into complete darkness. Before the abyss fully set in, however, before the world went black, I saw it. A third death card. The Grim Reaper was nothing but a faint outline in the blinding rays of a burning sun. All I could make out in the split second before the candle went out was the horse the skeleton rode on. It was the same familiar horse. We sat in the darkness for what felt like an eternity until I felt her touch my arm. Her grip was ethereal but firm. Without words, she led me to the door of the apartment. She did not ask for payment. She did not question me about the horse. She simply told me to never return. Soon enough, the screeches and shouts of Prague's downtown filled my ears once more. The chicken in my Texas Grander seemed undercooked, and the fries tasted like mashed potatoes, but at least the clerk let me use the phone charger. As soon as I had enough battery to turn on the phone, I did another frantic Google of cursed horse. All that came up were Red Dead Redemption 2 strategy guides and Pinterest blogs. I gave up. I decided I would just try to ignore the situation at home and enjoy the view from Ipe Pavlova's KFC.
Isn't someone going to do something?
Right outside of the window there was a makeshift tent. The crowds, the trams, the cars, all of the usual trappings of rush hour somehow existed next to the climate protest.
Reprogram, rebel, reflect.
Worrisome signs were hung from the edges of the tent, yet at its edge sat a ukulele circle of teens in tie-dye. Even though the trams were constantly spilling out crowds of busy-looking people, the protesters seemed to be in the depths of a heartfelt musical performance. Off to the side, trying to communicate the seriousness of climate change to the Russian commuters, were two other teens dressed in matching charity t-shirts.
How can we let this happen?
Some of the commuters took their flyers, but most just rushed on past. A woman who must have looked beautiful when color television was a novelty took umbrage with what the protesters had to say. One of the teens produced a bar chart filled with apocalyptic spikes. This did not solve the argument.
Extinction. It will happen to us. We must take responsibility.
Right beneath the text was a collection of skull pictures. One of them belonged to a human. One of them belonged to a horse. For a moment I wondered whether an animal was capable of comprehending climate change, whether we as a species were even capable of comprehending climate change. But then I found myself thinking about the horse again. It was early in the afternoon, but I knew what was waiting for me at home around midnight. The horse. I had gotten no closer to getting rid of it. I was tired and exhausted and alone in a world I couldn't comprehend. Sitting in that KFC, I felt like a man at the edge of a cliff. Della messaged me, asking if I wanted to have a drink and go over the tour path for Sunday. My stomach was coated in half a Texas Grander, and my mind was seized with incomprehensible worry. A drink and some company seemed like the most reasonable option. I let my phone charge past 50% and then I called an Uber. Adela still lived with her weird American roommate on the other side of town. With Prague traffic being Prague traffic, I figured I could squeeze in a nap through rush hour. By the time I made my way out of the KFC, the argument between the old lady and the teens had risen to enough fervor to gather a small audience. The protesters were too busy to offer me a flyer. I didn't mind. I just wanted to go somewhere quiet. The driver didn't ask my name, and I didn't introduce myself. I just memorized the first 3 letters of his license plate and got in the back of his beat-up Skoda. The inside of the car smelled of ancient cigarettes and stale beer. We moved half a meter before the car stopped. The driver got out. As if somewhere deep inside I knew what was about to happen, my eyes darted to my phone screen. A part of me must have registered the name when I ordered the Uber. A part of me must have known.
Open up. Don't be scared.
Yaroslav.
The moment I saw him, I locked the door. "I didn't steal your horse!" I yelled, but he refused to hear me.
Come out. Get out here.
He said, pulling on the handle.
Don't make me fucking angry.
With too much faith in my rhetoric skills, I unlocked the door. "I can explain," I said, knowing full well that I couldn't.
Don't be scared. Are you scared? Are you a fucking man?
He said, grabbing my collar with hands that smelled of cigarettes and rubbing alcohol.
What the fuck are you? You can't even fucking stand up. Are you a man? What the fuck are you?
I'm trying to get out of the car, but if you're in my way, look, I didn't steal your horse, but... That's as far as I got, before the first punch. Before I could make sense of the hits, I was rolling in the mosaic of cigarette butts that decorate the walkways of Prague's downtown. My beatdown was deemed more interesting than the argument about CO2 levels in the atmosphere, yet no one intervened. There was still a handful of commuters that found me less interesting than their destination, but most of Ipe Pavlova had slowed down to watch. The teens with the ukulele stopped singing. "Isn't someone going to do something?" I yelled, in the few moments that Yaroslav's fist wasn't connected to my face. The question remained purely hypothetical. Everyone just watched. The other carriage drivers were right. Yaroslav was an angry man. He was angry and strong. With nothing but fast food in my stomach, I was far too weak to fight back. Each strike my nose received brought reality closer to the hush of static. I knew that if I didn't act, I would end up like the pigeon Yaroslav allegedly stomped to death. "Your horse is in my bedroom," I yelled. His fist steadied. The anger burning behind his eyes gave way to disgust.
The fuck you doing to my horse?
"Nothing. I want to help. I want to get the horse back to you. I'm sorry I ever questioned how well you take care of it. Please, just stop hitting me." His fist was still clenched around my collar. But instead of hitting me again, Yaroslav started to force me into the car.
"Get up. Get in the car. I know where you fucking live now."
I didn't correct him about Adela's address. I didn't argue. I just climbed into the car and hoped he wouldn't murder me. Yaroslav drove erratically, electing to stick to the tram lines rather than to the actual road. I wasn't sure if he was driving on cobblestone because he was trying to get away from the cops or if the bystanders might have called, or whether he was an erratic driver by nature. I didn't ask. I just sat in the back of the car, trying to not get any of my nosebleed on the seats.
"Where the fuck is my horse?"
He finally asked when no more traffic laws could be broken and we got stuck on a bridge gridlock.
"Tell me what the fuck you did with my horse before I throw you into the fucking river."
"I didn't do anything. I swear to God I didn't steal your horse. The night after we argued, it just appeared in my bedroom. It keeps on appearing in my bedroom. Every night, around midnight, it just stands in my room and then disappears when the morning comes. Please, believe me, I want it gone. I want to give the horse back to you. I just don't know how." Yaroslav didn't respond. Instead, he drove on the sidewalk and cut towards the motorway. The moment he had a chance to speed up, he took it. We flew above the ancient streets of Prague at breakneck speed, wiping away centuries of history in seconds. "I'm so sorry," I said, hoping that my penance would make Yaroslav less likely to end both of our lives in a fiery wreck. The engine roared as he slalomed around the other cars. With one hand on the wheel and his furious eyes everywhere but on the road, he lit up a cigarette.
"Shouldn't have posed a fucking hypothetical to the universe."
The words left his mouth in a plume of thick smoke. "What do I do to get rid of the horse? How do I give it back to you? Please, I can't last another night with the animal in my tiny apartment. Please, just tell me what to do." The air filled with scratchy silk strains. The world beyond the smoke started to fade.
"Do I look like a fucking magical detective to you?"
he hissed as we drove into a tunnel. The universe smoldered down into repeating flashes of orange from the outside world and the green light of the dashboard.
"You brought this shit on yourself. I was the one who provoked the universe. You cooked this fucking porridge and now you get a fucking choke on it. Don't ask me what to do, just fucking bring me back my horse."
The car came to an abrupt stop. Past the smoke, I could see the outlines of communist-era cement. "How?" I asked.
"Are you fucking deaf? I don't know, just get it done. Or else."
A fist crashed into a palm in the cigarette-induced fog.
"Now get the fuck out of my car and rate me 5 stars.
Adela screamed the moment she saw me in the hallway. I wasn't surprised. The reflection that stared back at me from the elevator was definitely scream-worthy. I felt, just as I looked, physically assaulted. What surprised me about Adela's response was how quickly she took control of the situation. Adela, unlike me, had attended one of the pseudo-mandatory first aid courses for tour guides. Within 2 minutes, I was lying on her couch with a cold compress on my forehead and frozen peas over my nose. She dug out a multitude of painkillers from her backpack, asked me if I'm allergic to any of them, and then asked me if I needed her to call the police. I was exhausted and bruised and hopeless. I didn't have the energy to lie or to be vague. As I told her about the horse, her face grew progressively more concerned. By the time I finished my story, she only had one comment. I think you've had a concussion, Mark. We should go to the hospital. I swear this is all real. I might have a concussion. Yeah, probably do. But the horse is real. That's why I asked you about supernatural help. That's why I went to the tarot card reader. Her face softened. I couldn't tell whether she was starting to believe my story or whether she had simply decided to play along. How did that go? Did you find any answers with the tarot? I told her about my trip to Ipe Pavlova, about the 3 death cards and the fortune teller's reaction to my prediction. I told Adela how lost and afraid I was, and in response, her face softened further. Whether she believed my story was a mystery, but I could see she cared for my well-being. So, what's the plan now? She finally asked. I don't know. I think the insane carriage driver is still waiting outside. I'd like to lay low for a bit, gather my thoughts, and then figure out what to do next. Would that be okay with you? At least half an hour until I'm sure Yaroslav is gone, then I'll get out of your hair. Oh, stay as long as you like. The horse situation sounds, complicated. Happy to help however I can. Hope you don't mind if I have a drink though. Long day. The cold compress stopped the throbbing aches in my face. Even though the frozen peas were completely covering my nose, it was no longer painful to breathe. I was thankful. So, how have you been, Adela? Better than you, I guess, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. Just tired. Very tired. 6 hours of yelling a day really takes it out of you. Feel like a complete corpse. Looking forward to getting out of the city tomorrow, though. She took a sip, but then paused, realizing something. I'll still do the shift on Sunday, I said, before she had to ask. Horse or no horse, I need the money. I'm sure you'll do great. The people showing up these days are really nice, she said, filling up another glass. I'm also sure you'll find a way to get rid of that horse. Here's to hoping. The white wine didn't pair well with the blood in the back of my throat, but after a couple of gulps, I found my nerves loosening. A nice breeze from the outside made the world bearable without the cold compress. I looked around the apartment, looking for anything to talk about besides the horse. Where's, Sean? I asked. Adela's roommate had always been a good source of distraction. God knows. I think he went tripping to some psytrance festival. Poor guy went crazy, or more accurately, crazier during the lockdowns. She topped off her glass and took a healthy swig. Brought a frigging pigeon back home last April. Oh God, why? Said he was having nightmares and needed a new dream catcher. Apparently feathers from live animals have more energy. A dream catcher with prog pigeon feathers doesn't sound very spiritual, or healthy for that matter. Those things carry all sorts of diseases. That's what I said. Adela's roommate had always been a good source of distraction. Soon enough, we were talking shit about our old parent company and rehashing old war stories. The bottle of wine quickly drained. By the time we were down in the corner store, I couldn't feel my face at all. I wasn't sure if it was the booze or the swelling, but I bought a new pack of frozen peas just to be sure. We also bought 2 bottles of wine. We drank them soon after. Before the plague, back when Adela and me were forced to attend meetings of our old parent company, we had a habit of getting absolutely plastered on the Vltava River. The meetings were always held on one of the tour boats, and there was plenty of free booze. No one ever questioned the free tour guides during the meetings, and enough of our colleagues took their responsibility seriously enough to cover for us, in case it was needed. As people droned on about hotel reservations and obscure chapel reconstructions below, Adela and me would get liquored up on the viewing deck while watching the city from the river. Her room was considerably less spacious than the top deck of SS Tourist Trap, but it was a nice change from my cramped bedroom. As we drank, Adela pulled up 1-star reviews for our parent company's guided bus tours, and we went through our all-time favorites. In my drunkenness, things were starting to feel familiar. It was as if no time had passed since the last company meeting. The boat rides always took forever. A normal sightseeing tour of the Vltava takes about 2 hours, a time period which the owner of the company deemed insufficient for his monologues. So the boat would have to crawl its way through the riverside twice. 4 hours of comfort drinking always proved to be far too much for us. Each night would always end the same way. We would slump on plastic benches that were painted to look like wood as 1,000 years of history flowed by us. We would be deaf and dumb to the world, dragged down by both the booze and the exhaustion from whatever shift we had just finished. We would lean on each other and have the cognitive abilities of corpses, but we still knew where we were. We still knew what we were. We were happy little parasites. Happy little parasites that had somehow managed to attach themselves to something much bigger and weirder and eternal. Through repetition, the marvelous architecture had lost its charm. Through daily walks, the cobblestone felt more like an inconvenience. But with our minds diminished, and with the evening air in our hair, we knew exactly where we were. "Jezus Maria!" she yelled. The sun had set, and the room had sizzled down to the dim lights of resting screens and active chargers. I could recognize the rough outlines of Adela's living room. I could also recognize something else. "Oh God, Mark, is this?" "Yes." When I got off the couch, a crippling hangover pulsed through my bones, but I bit past the nausea. There was a horse to soothe. His bulging eyes darted around the room in fear, but when I touched him, the animal calmed. "Shh, horse, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here." A lamp by the side of the couch lit up. This panicked the horse somewhat, but the animal was considerably calmer than the night I left it alone in the apartment. "Sorry," Adela said. "It's just, wow. There's a horse in my apartment." The horse said, as if it was also voicing its confusion. "Do you have any apples?" I asked. The horse really likes apples. I was left alone with the horse while Adela went to search the fridge. The animal's big dumb eyes looked at me for answers, as they always had, but something felt different. The horse knew. The horse knew that after nearly a week of unchecked chaos, there was a sliver of hope. We were not in my cramped bedroom anymore. The logic of this mind-boggling equestrian curse was starting to reveal itself. Sean keeps these apple slices in his rolling tobacco to keep stuff fresh," Adela said, producing an apple fit for a barnyard animal. "I also brought a trash bag." "What for?" She spread out the black plastic near the horse's tail. The animal didn't mind. It was too busy chomping on the apple and taking in its new, spacious surroundings. "If the horse is gonna be here till sunrise, I don't want to risk it shitting on the floor. Wouldn't want my room to smell of manure for the rest of eternity." "Oh yeah," I said, realizing that I'm an idiot. "Trash bag. That's smart. I did that too." The night outside was calm. With the exception of a particularly anxious dog barking outside, nothing stirred. In silence, we stared at the animal, and the animal stared back at us. "So, you must be kind of relieved, right?" she said, not taking her eyes off the horse. I nodded. The horse sighed. My bedroom was far too cramped for an animal to move, but the spacious floor plan of Adela's living room provided plenty of comfort. The horse stepped from hoof to hoof, and then, with what almost seemed like a purr of approval, the animal laid down. "So, tomorrow night, you'll just sleep somewhere near the angry carriage driver dude, and you'll be, not cursed anymore?" "I would hope so." "Cool. Weird, and horrifying, and definitely disconcerting vis-a-vis the laws of the universe, but cool. Bet you're a bit less nervous about Sunday now, eh?" I had made a leap in figuring out the nature of my equestrian curse, and I felt the joy of it, but everything past that was wine-filled regret. "I feel like shit," I said, tasting the rot of a hangover in my mouth. Happy about the horse thing, but I still feel like shit. I'll go check if there's any Gatorade in the house. I wasn't sure if finding out that the horse appears in the place where I last slept would help. With a bit of luck, I could pass out on the benches outside of my apartment and then call the cops. Surely they would find someone to take care of the horse. I was uncertain whether the horse wouldn't just reappear in my bedroom the following night, but I refused to hold on to those doubts. Sitting there on the couch, watching a barnyard animal try to get comfortable on the 5th floor of a Soviet-era apartment, I knew I needed a win. "Oh hey, Mark." A familiar voice sounded off from the door. Even though it was well past midnight, Sean still had his sunglasses on. Poorly stitched patches of cartoon eyeballs hung from his jean jacket. The only thing that had changed about the eccentric since the plague was his facial hair. "Whoa, would hate to see how the other guy looks like. Is he in the hospital?" "No. Still roaming the streets of Prague in his Uber." The horse didn't react strongly to Sean's entrance. Sean himself seemed almost disinterested in the animal. The guy just leant up against the doorframe and watched the horse in his living room as if it had been a part of a completely regular occurrence. After a couple seconds, however, his curiosity got the better of him. "That's, your horse, Mark?" "Kind of." I gave Sean a concise version of my horse predicament. His face lacked any skepticism as I told him my story, but he offered considerably less advice than Adela did. All that Sean managed to say in response to my tale of cosmic confusion was, "That's Prague for you, I guess." Adele returned with a single bottle of Gatorade that we rationed between each other. After a couple of minutes, she was feeling considerably less hungover. Even poured herself a glass of wine. Yet my body was still a wreck. I wasn't sure whether it was the booze or the nerves, but something at my core was slowly starting to suggest I should go vomit. "This should help," Sean said, fishing a flask out of his jacket. It shined of silver and had a 6-legged horse emblazoned on its side. "What's in it?" I asked. "Hair of the dog. It'll make your hangovers go away," he replied. I didn't want to vomit outside the comfort of my own house, and I was far too exhausted to question the contents of the flask further. I just took a big swig and hoped for the best. In an instant, my throat lit up with a cleansing pain. The drink sunk its claws into the depths of my stomach, but it cleared out the phlegm from my throat. "Jesus, Sean, what the hell is this?" "Something Slovakian," he said. "Strong stuff, but good stuff. Don't drink too much of it, though. You'll go blind." I capped the flask and tried to pass it back to Sean, but he shook his head. "No," he said. "One doesn't just pose a hypothetical to the universe and carries on. You still have a journey ahead of you. You'll need the liquid help. Consider it an early or late birthday gift. It's been a while." "It has," Adela said, refilling her glass. "Where you been tonight anyway, Sean?" As the three of us sat on the couch, Sean entertained us with a story from a psytrance festival held in an old abandoned factory. Adela kept on filling her glass, our raconteurs smoked a handful of solitary joints, and I just kept on watching the horse laying in the middle of the room. The animal had been calmer than it had ever been, but his eyes were still filled with a nebulous sadness. With Adela's permission, I pulled up some royalty-free footage of wild horses on the television. As Sean told his elaborate drug stories, the horse watched the screen with fascination. I was happy to bring the animal some form of distraction, but the longer I watched those huge eyes gaze at drone footage of freedom, the more I realized I was showing the horse something that it would never have. There were no quiet meadows to run through in the city of Prague, and Yaroslav would never allow the animal to move at any speed faster than a tourist-friendly trot. I felt bad about myself, but I found distraction in Sean's stories. By the time the stories became too complicated to follow, my hungover and beaten body found rest on the couch. When I woke, all that was left of the horse was just excrement on a plastic bag. Sean had left for his room, and Adela was far too deep in intoxicated hibernation to wake up. I gathered up the horse's mess and tiptoed my way out of the apartment. Adela lived in the housing projects on the edge of town, and so did I, but we lived on opposite sides of Prague. Jumping between buses and metros to make my way home seemed like far too difficult a task for my diminished state, so once I disposed of the trash bag, I called an Uber. The moment I saw the driver's name, I cancelled my ride. I tried hailing a Bolt, but the same name popped up once again. Yaroslav. Meeting the angry carriage driver was a part of the plan I had hatched up on Adela's couch, but I had no interest in sharing another car ride with the maniac. If he wanted his horse back, he would have to meet me outside of the police station, or wherever authorities store mysterious horses. I was not going to let the man beat the shit out of me again, without the police being present. I swept my way through a couple more obscure ride-sharing apps, and they all returned back the same name. I had consigned myself to the slow crawl of public transportation, yet, just as I was about to shuffle my way to the nearest metro station, a familiar beat-up Skoda pulled up next to me.
I should crack your face for cancelling all those fucking rides,
Yaroslav hissed from an open smoky window.
But all I want from you now is for you to explain to me exactly how I'm going to get reacquainted with my stolen property. Get in the car.
I have a plan. I just need some time. Let me take the subway back home and I will call you.
That wasn't a fucking request. Get in the car.